Just take another look at the text with me for a moment. Obviously, a selective reading. Haven't you read? Jesus said that at the beginning the Creator made them black and white, so the two could be like one flesh, so they no longer are two, but one. Why then did Moses allow for divorce? Jesus replied, Moses permitted divorce because your hearts were hard. The disciples said, this sounds hard. If this is a situation between a husband and a wife, it's better not to marry at all. And Jesus replied that not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. I wanted to find a way to say something different about race, something new, not something that hasn't been said so much to be fancy or creative, but so much has been said. There's so many words already spilled. And it occurred to me that marriage is about as good a metaphor for the interaction of tribalism and globalism that we are now experiencing as any. America first has been the week's theme, and people like me wonder what that could possibly mean. As an American, I don't want to be first. I want to be connected. I want to be married. I want to be in relationship. Isn't it strange that so much of marriage really does involve a power struggle? Those of us who are married know it way too well. And you know, the only way to lose at marriage is to win the power struggle. To be first in marriage is to be last. To be the greatest country in the world is to be the worst country in the world. It lacks class. It lacks humility. To be the first in a partnership of equals goes the same route. And for white people to imagine or to be treated as though we are better than black people is just wild. It's a surefire way to taking whatever might be good in us out of us. And additionally, is it not strange that the Jewish ceremony of marriage ends with a broken, shattered glass? You do this violent thing at the end. You stamp on it, and it shatters. Isn't it strange that in some African American communities still there is a tradition of dancing the broom of slavery, the broom of waiting on other people? And isn't it incredible that a man named Corey Menafee, a Yale University employee, on June 13th took a broom and broke a stained glass window in the cafeteria where he had been employed at Calhoun College? Isn't that strange? I wondered if he had any marriage sense at all about it. I doubt it fully. He just got fed up. He said, why should I come to work every day and look at that picture of those two slaves carrying things? And so one day, he took a broom and he shattered the stained glass window at Calhoun College at Yale. Truth, my husband is a fellow of Calhoun College. Second truth, Yale University, a former employer of mine, has refused to change the name of Calhoun College, which is what a lot of this fuss was about, in addition to the representation. Notably, they are finally going to give an African American and a woman the name for one of their very, very famous colleges. Her name is Anna Pauline Murray, and she will join Benjamin Franklin in having the name. They couldn't do two women. That would be almost as bad as having two women on the platform for the Democratic Party. You just can't have two people of the same gender on a political platform. It can't be done. So Anna Pauline Murray will be the first African American and the first woman for a college at Yale to be named. She is ordained as an Episcopal priest. She has several law degrees. But get this, she was arrested in 1940 for refusing to sit on a broken seat in the back of a Virginia bus 15 years before Rosa Parks' action. And I guess Yale is trying to make amends for the problem with Calhoun, doubly. So if you look around this room right now at our own stained glass, we don't have any people of color here. The National Cathedral has just taken out images of the Confederate flag that were in part of its stained glass after a long fight. You can just imagine the number of meetings that would be involved in taking out a Confederate flag out of the stained glass at the National Cathedral. That is my idea of a headache. But that being said, it is interesting how physical things represent spiritual and political reality at almost all times. And we're almost unconscious of the degree to which they do it. I want to say something about changing how we think about visible things, seeable things, things that can shatter by way of a broom. The big word for it is to think sacramentally. Most of you know that a sacrament is a visible sign of an invisible grace. That's the fancy definition for it. And somehow, some of our stained glass windows is sacramental and maybe not all of it. Maybe we have depicted things that are before us as opposed to going forward with us to where we want to go. Sacramental thinking works like this. You heard the axis of the text. It said, you can divorce, but you shouldn't. You can, but you shouldn't. Now, clearly humanity can be separated into tribes, but we should not be. That's one kind of thinking. Sacramental thinking is on another axis, and it is you may if you want to. You may divorce if you want to. You may do good if you want to. You may move out of tribalism into goodness if you want to. Not you should, but you may. So the Catholics have 7 sacraments. We Protestants only have 2. We have baptism and agape, but the Catholics take you through your whole life sacramentally. You may join up with the church at confirmation after you've been baptized. You may, when you marry, it's understood as sacramental. You may be anointed and healed by the touch of a priest. You may get ordained or come to some kind of vocation. You surely will commune regularly, and there is a sacrament attached to the notion of penance or forgiveness. You may ask for forgiveness if you want to. Very different than doing a should. So I want to just name a few things that would help us do the kind of spiritual remediation that we need to do to get to the place where all of our windows have light shining through them. And by the way, I'm not suggesting we go into a 14-year discussion about the stained glass windows. I do think it's important to notice how surrounded we are by a kind of whiteness in our own tradition. So one of the big arguments that's going on right now is, and just think sacramentally, is you would refuse to give advice to movements. What really galls me about the Black Lives Matter conversation that's happening is that a lot of white people seem to think we have the right to give advice to people who are naming their own movement. Now, why do we do that? Because we can, and somehow we think we should. Why do we think we should give advice to other people on any subject, much less the subject of how to name a movement? Now, I understand that all lives matter. I'm not sure you have to say that all the time. We've had a good conversation here about this, and I hope it will continue. But I want to get to the notion of giving advice in the first place. Some of you know that I'm working with Etsy.org on a spiritual entrepreneurship project where I'm learning a lot of things about how to talk to people. And one of the things that the other trainers in this program insist upon is that when a person names a problem, that we not immediately give them advice. So somebody will say, I'm having trouble getting a supplier for organic whole wheat flour. Well, 19 people will give them a supplier immediately. Someone will say, I don't really know how to do the writing that's involved in this program. It's too hard for me. So people will start giving advice. That is a should approach. And you know what happens when you give people advice? You go like this, you say goodbye, and you don't really continue the conversation. You've done your bit, you've done what you should do. So instead, what we've been doing in the program is saying, refusing to give advice or asking each other not to give advice and saying, can you say more about what your intention is in getting that kind of flour or learning how to write better? Where are you trying to go? What is it that you want? And it changes the quality of the conversation. So that whenever someone says, you'd do better if you named your movement something different, another way would be to say, what is your intention in calling the movement that? Where are you trying to get to? You will find that you can have much better conversations by asking the intention rather than giving advice. And some of us are so smart, especially me, I just give advice all the time, and it's the best advice you're ever going to get for the price. And I can hardly help myself. So really, a preacher like me has to preach to herself about this. I love to tell movements how to run their movement. It's one of my favorite sports. Another example. We could stop putting people down. It's sort of simple Christianity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know where this thing comes from? Redneck? All my West Virginia friends ought to know. We have a whole cohort of West Virginians in this conversation. Southern plantation owners felt they had to find a way to justify their own supremacy, and so they put down uneducated white people all the time, and these are people who worked outside and whose necks were sunburned. They called them rednecks. Also, in West Virginia miners in the strikes of the 1920s, facing a mercenary militia hired by a millionaire coal baron, many of them, the miners took pains to become organized, adopting a uniform that featured a red bandana worn around the neck, nicknaming themselves Rednecks. Now, when you and I, or at least when I, use the term redneck now, we don't mean anything polite at all, do we? We mean closed-minded, dumb, stupid, people who just don't count. How's that working for us? What is our intention with that kind of behavior? Where is it taking a once great nation? You know, it can be a great nation without having to be first. Final example, right up the street. I couldn't believe it. Oh, really nice restaurant. I like it. You can figure out which one it is. It's got a big sign in its front door that says, "Come in here and eat food the way people ate before industry destroyed food." And you know, I kind of like that idea because I don't think industry has done that many great things to food. But that kind of thinking also acts like the only people who deserve to eat are the smart people. You know, the ones who know a macrobiotic diet from a fattening one. It's elitist. Before industry destroyed food, without industry there would be a lot fewer people on the planet. So how do we spiritually become the kind of people we want to be so that we don't have to pick up brooms and smash stained glasses? Although Yale did take him back and he's got a job. They understood that maybe the man just had enough of looking at that picture every day. But my broom is not always handy. I really don't like picking up stained glass on the floor. And I want to be married to the human race and to be a part of it and to be in it and to be engaged with it. And I need spiritual remediation. Amen.